You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, why don't you go ahead and introduce today's guest?
Hi, my name is Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce Sam Ginn. We're going to talk about veterinary practice management software, very broad topic, but I think Sam is a big guy to talk about this. The reason is because he's the founder and CEO of Vetspire. He's previously a artificial intelligence researcher in natural language processing at Stanford University. He holds the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Bachelor of Arts in Comparative Literature, and both degrees are from Stanford. On the personal side of things, he appeared on Stanford radio broadcast entitled Opinions to discuss the technological singularity. Sam, really happy to have you here, and thank you for joining us. I know how busy you are. We're going to talk about practice management systems, technology, and also the artificial intelligence related to it. So one of the first questions I want to ask, what inspired you to make a Vetspire, and what is different?
Good question.
Oh, no. Well, thank you so much, Ivan. And first of all, before I jump in, it's such a pleasure to be on the show with you both. I've been really looking forward to this. Yeah, so to jump right in, I kind of grew up in veterinary medicine. Before heading out to California and Stanford, I grew up in Chicago with my mother, who's a veterinarian. She started her own practice here about 30 years ago, bought an old Victorian home, and converted it into a veterinary hospital. And I grew up in that world. And so, dealing with both all the joys of having a veterinarian as a mother and all of the problems, she would stop working at like 6 or 8 at night when she'd stop seeing clients and still wouldn't come home for, 2 hours while she was finishing writing up her notes. And, it's awful. They are so overworked in their profession. There's so much to do and so little time during their day. They're so busy with not at all, kind of the support structures that you have in human medicine. And I was there when they switched, over from paper records over to electronic records. And you think, a lot of it should have got better. There should have been more automation, more successful time-saving procedures. But in most of the ways, things just became harder to do. It took more time to type into the computer. Things weren't as flexible anymore. Even things just operationally like billing became harder. And it was just so incongruous with the dream that I always have of why I love technology so much is that you can do anything. We kind of have this digital canvas of this computer and we can make anything with it. And somewhere down the line, we failed to build software that really made a difference for veterinarians, that made their lives easier, that made them more efficient. And instead, we were just hindering them. And so that's really, the first and primordial inspiration for myself is, how can we make these lives of veterinarians more effective at their jobs, more efficient, so, they can get home to their families earlier. And that was really the original impetus, but then it became much larger than that. So, at Stanford, I was working in natural language processing and leveraging artificial intelligence, helping out in areas like human medicine, doing big data analysis. And there's so much wonderful work and investment and research going into that space in human medicine, but there's none of that happening in veterinary medicine. And so I really started Vetspire with kind of two goals. The first, of course, being that, how can we just build better technology for veterinarians that makes their lives easier, that makes them more efficient? But then secondly, how can we leverage and use all of the state-of-the-art technology and know-how that we have in artificial intelligence and other fields to better veterinary medicine itself? There's very little clinical trials across the space right now because there's very little money compared to human medicine, which is a shame. But what you do have is all of this data right now currently trapped in all of these different practice management systems just sitting there and not doing anything. They're stored, locally on servers and hospital basements and in server closets still, and it's not contributing at all. But what if we could, amass all of these different medical records that doctors are writing every single day into their practice management system onto some centralized location where we could then run our artificial intelligence on top of it? That's really the end-all kind of mission behind Vetspire, of collecting all of this data, using artificial intelligence to then build open a research platform on top of it. If you wanted to answer the question, find me and compare the different treatment outcome efficacies for stage 2, leukemia among felines age 10 through 15 who also have a history of diabetes. Right now, that'd be almost impossible. But if you could leverage this all, use AI and natural language processing to analyze the medical records, analyze the text that veterinarians are writing, this could be something that a researcher could just query and get an answer to instantly. I mean, they'd be able to validate hypotheses, run population health management studies, veterinary surveillance. I mean, the possibilities for this are endless. And that's really my dream vision for this. There's a great study by the University of Guelph a couple months ago where they did a long longitudinal study of cats, and they found that the average weight for cats in North America is increasing over the last decade. And so cats are fatter than ever, which is an interesting result and a breakthrough study for them. But it just goes to show the limitations of data collection right now. The best and biggest study we can do is just tracking weight. It seems we should be able to do so much more than we're doing right now. And so that's really the end vision of Vetspire, make a practice management product that is so wonderfully easy to use, that gives back to the veterinarians by making their lives so much better, so that everybody wants to use it, so that they can all contribute with their medical records to the artificial intelligence and to the research that we want to run eventually.
So I've got so many questions and so many different directions that we could take this. I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire ones, Sam, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so the first one, was your mom your first customer?
No, she was not. We had a gentleman in California who wanted very much to be the first customer.
Is your mom a customer now?
Yeah, she's wonderful. She for a long time we didn't do business together, but
that's great.
we came around to it.
Good to see your vision completed of fixing your mom's problem. That's pretty exciting. Totally different direction. What's your opinion on the technology singularity? Where do you think we're heading? How quickly are we going to get there?
No, I think it's such an important question right now. In terms of artificial intelligence, it has this kind of latent power that is so incredible. The singularity, of course, is the moment that AI kind of surpasses human intelligence. You're able to build an AI that is generally intelligent, that kind of AI of science fiction. And once you hit that point where it's able to become self-learning, teach itself any new tasks, you kind of hit a moment, a singular point where things grow exponentially in terms of its own intelligence, and it just becomes unparalleled to the human mind to be able to compete with it. And I think that point is inevitable. It's just a matter of time and energy and dedication of ourselves, of the human researchers, looking into this problem until we reach it. I think we've proven that it's theoretically possible. And so it's just a matter of finding out the right algorithm. And, if you asked me this 50 years ago, I would have said it's impossible to build right now. Nobody has any worries. Yes, eventually we'll get there, but we're not anywhere close.
It's really interesting, with all of the quantum computing stuff that's happening with Google and all of these different things that have happened. It's very interesting. But when do you think we'll get there? What date in time?
I would say you're going to see it happen within the next 50 or so years. I think finally we're no longer limited by hardware. You have enough computing power if you wanted that you could build a big enough computer in your garage to rival the human brain, which you couldn't have done 50 years ago. So, it's no longer limited to government labs doing this research. Anybody can. And that's both the fun and scary part, that you have that computing power. And so that all that's missing is just the idea. Somebody's just missing the theory of how it works and how it should be programmed, and go do it. It could be a big government research lab. It could be a hacker in their garage figuring it out. And that's the exciting part. And so that's why it's a big unknown. It's just somebody's waiting for that Einstein figure to have that moment of inspiration while on a train. So it could be 200 years from now. It could be tomorrow. And, there's no limit to it at the moment.
I think you left yourself open to be right there, which is super awesome. I think Kurzweil, I think it was 2 years ago at South by Southwest, said that we're going to get there at 2045. And after all, he wrote the book, so it seems like he's a little bit more optimistic than you are, but it's going to be interesting nevertheless. One of my favorite reads.
I definitely think I will see it within my lifetime.
Yeah, pretty epic. I think it bodes well for our lives being extended. But anyways, Ivan, I think you had a question. Let's go back to veterinary medicine and innovation. So I think me and Sam might get lost on this topic if we started.
No. It was there's something. I was at the lecture of the CFOs of Ukraine, out of all things, and there was they did some study and they projected how smarter the dogs are getting, and then it was somehow related to the point of singularity. And I don't remember how it is, but they came out with this whole equation where at some point dogs are going to be smarter than people. It was something crazy. But anyway.
That's like the engineer from Intel that asked me if our software took the barking from the dog and turned it into text that humans could read. Remember I showed you on LinkedIn, the message on LinkedIn? It was, I'm never deleting that.
And you told him that it does, right?
Yeah, I did. And then I just played with him a little bit. Sam, another point that I wanted to make is I was at the grocery store the other day buying cat food, which is something I haven't done in probably 20 years. I went to the grocery aisle, and in the grocery aisle, there was Alaskan salmon appetizer for cats. There was chicken tenderloins appetizer for cats. And so I think I might be on to why cats may be increasing in weight and size. And also the aisle. It was a whole aisle of cat food. I was absolutely blown away. It was pretty amazing.
Sam, so this is an amazing vision, and I love it. And I've been kind of following and talking to you here and there. But the challenge that I've seen, just to be a little more pragmatic on what's happening right now, Vetspire is kind of, penetrating the market. There's other software products, and the further we develop, the more diversity in the data structure and the database structure and the, server cloud, extractors, all of that stuff to get to where you want it to get to, it needs to all align, normalize, and act together. So how do you think the industry will progress to get to that point? I mean, one way to do it is to get 28,000 hospitals on Vetspire, which I think is a great goal. But how do you think this will happen in the industry with all the disparate sets of data? Is there an alignment that needs to happen in the industry, or is it sort of a robust normalization engine? What do you think needs to happen to get what you're talking about?
Oh, no, I mean, I think this is a great question, and it's a very interesting problem, because how I kind of always describe it is in terms of surface area. Vetspire right now has medical records of our, small hospital population at the moment, and that's great surface area, but it's small. And the industry at large is really huge. So the easy solution, of course, is, well, let's get every single veterinarian using Vetspire, which is a great goal. But of course, even if Vetspire is the most amazing, brilliant product you've ever seen, it'll still take a long time to get there. And we want to be doing, of course, this research in AI as soon as possible. And one of the biggest timing factors to that is this industry right now is composed of a lot of walled gardens. You've got your IDEX diagnostics over here. You've got your Antech diagnostics over here. Mars and Antech don't want to share. You've got what medications are being prescribed with this pharmaceutical company over here, and, another one over there, and nobody's sharing any data. I even talk to clinics, where they work with, some pharmaceutical distributors and things like that reach out directly to their consumers, and they even struggle to get back what prescriptions are being sent to their own clients. And, it's such an industry where there is no kind of centralized data format where people can share records. Even communicating between an ER facility and the general practice is sometimes still done over fax. I would say fax more often than emails now, which is a shame. In human medicine, there's centralized specifications, things called HL7 that enable sharing and cross-pollination of data. But that was all driven by, one, the insurance industries, and two, the federal government. You don't have either of those in big force within veterinary medicine. And so you're left with needing to be able to connect with all of these different players in order to build kind of your data warehouse to build and run all of this AI. Because if you ask any AI researcher, the biggest key to unlocking any good AI is data. You need more data to be more successful. And if you don't have the data, you can have all the brightest AI people in the world that you want, and they won't be able to do anything with that. And so you need to kind of work within the industry to get everybody on board. This kind of research initiative can't just be a singular force that you try to push through. It has to be collaborative, and we work very closely with IDEX, with all these other different companies in the space, whether it's, the X-ray imaging companies, because we want to be able to collect and share all of that data and put it kind of on not necessarily a centralized store, but on an open access store where anybody should be able to pull it, whether it's us or somebody else leveraging the AI. And I think a big part of that is what you just brought up, Ivan, is normalization. There is no normalized specification for how veterinary medicine, how medical records, how x-rays, how laboratory results should be shared. And so that's one of our goals as well, is to kind of create a standard format that everybody can understand, and both on the research side and on the practice side, so that you're able to kind of encourage that collaboration a little bit more easier.
Sam, I got a question for you. So a couple of years ago, data surpassed oil as the most valuable commodity on the earth. Who owns the data that's in Vetspire?
All of our, and this is part of our initial contract, all of our clients own their data. The practices using Vetspire, it's their data. And as part of our kind of agreement, we give them an option if they would like to share their data anonymously with Vetspire and our researchers to be used for research purposes. So a hospital is welcome to use Vetspire without letting us use their data at all for AI purposes if they don't feel comfortable with that. And that's totally their prerogative. It's their data to own. But we ask everybody to allow us to use the data anonymously, and we scrub any personally identifiable information from their own clients or patients or anything like that, and then put it into one giant kind of soup in order to analyze leveraging AI. All of our clients do let us do that at the moment. There might come a time when somebody doesn't feel comfortable, and that's totally fine. It's their data to own. And that's also really important. It's not our data. We're just kind of the stewards of it. And if at any point they want to ask for it back, it's our obligation and responsibility to do it, because it's each clinic's own data.
With that, that's a Vetspire rule. But what do you think, because right now there's a lot of debate about the data, and then, there's certain alarms going off in the industry. And the Europe is now aligned all around the GDPR, which I think is coming to North America. There's Californian law, and then I think it's going to go across. It just makes sense then. Data is valuable, and then it belongs to someone. Now, belongs, and then also how it is utilized is, kind of different things, because you can aggregate the data, and do you change ownership in that? And is it no, it doesn't belong because it's an aggregated data? Should there be a separate ways of articulating this question? Or also, I heard some advanced companies, bigger companies in the industry, and I'm not going to name them, but they started thinking that the data actually belongs not to the clinic, but to the pet owner, because they generated it, and it's, and that's what they think. So do you have a comment about that?
Well, an interesting analog is human medicine in the United States, where we have HIPAA laws, which are probably the most stringent kind of privacy laws. And it's interesting to see kind of the workarounds that companies do, because you're so correct, Ivan and Shawn, both, that data is so, and not yet in veterinary medicine, but this industry is becoming more cognizant to the fact of just how valuable data is and data can be. But in human medicine, they've known that for a long time. And so they've got very strong privacy laws protecting the privacy of individual patients, but only when there's personalized identifiable information. So if I were to take a human medical record and just redact out the names, phone numbers, and addresses, that now becomes an anonymized piece of data that the company or hospital or insurance company then owns and can share with whoever they want. Once it becomes anonymized, it's no longer covered by HIPAA. But yet, and still a lot of times, a really hard and dedicated researcher can then go back and identify where that information originally came from, because there's more than just names that would lend them cues, the one person who had leukemia in a small town. And so it's very hard to guarantee to people that data would be anonymized. And then it just gets shared around in human medicine. And on one hand, that's very good, because researchers like myself, people doing drug discovery programs, grand genetic research, big data analysis, are able to gather this data and get really good, meaningful results from it, because they're able to have that much data. but it's also a little worrisome. Did they have a right to access that data without the patient's consent? Does the patient own that medical record data? And I think this is an ethical problem that has yet to been solved, because on one hand, I very much want as much data as possible to be collected, because that helps us AI folks, be able to run research, which undeniably benefits humanity as a whole, and hopefully pets as a whole as well. But on the other hand, you have to respect privacy. If people don't want to contribute to that, they shouldn't be forced to. So even in working with Vetspire, it's an ethical question. Who should we be asking for consent to run AI algorithms on top of the data? Should it be the hospital owner, the person, who has the contract with Vetspire and using Vetspire? Can we use their data? Do they have the right to grant consent on behalf of all of the pet owners? Or should we be asking, each pet owner, would they like to contribute their pet's data, to studies? And it's a hard question to answer. Right now we say it's the hospital owner because that's the one who we have the relationship with. But in human medicine, it's the opposite. It's the pet owners. It's the individual who owns their own data. And I think that's an open question, and it's one that the industry and regulation should decide, not just in veterinary medicine, but at large. Is it the companies, Google, et cetera, that owns the data, or is it each individual who can ask for it to be revoked?
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic. Sam, a couple of things. Me and Ivan, we know lots about your company. We know that you're an innovator in this space, but a lot of people that listen to our show don't really understand what Vetspire is and what's different about Vetspire when we look at it compared to, say, other practice managements that do live in the closet, on the server, in the basement floor. Can you give our listeners a brief overall description of what makes you guys unique and different, and how you approach practice management compared to some of your competitors?
So Vetspire, of course, it's a cloud-based practice management platform, and so it does everything. It completely replaces, your Cornerstone or Avamarks, et cetera. And we had the liberty and fortune with Vetspire to kind of build it all up from the ground up. And so Avamark, was starting to be built in the 1970s. And if you look at it, it probably hasn't really been updated much since then. Same with, almost all of the other competitors in this space, which is a shame because you're saddling veterinarians with ancient and antiquated technology. If I ask almost any practice manager, any veterinarian, do they like their current practice management software, they all tell us no. They hate it. It's the worst part of their day. They're more like typists and computer administrators than they are veterinarians. That is just so sad, from my perspective as a technologist, that we failed them. And so that's, from Vetspire, what we tried to build around. So Vetspire is built originally for the purposes of medical records. It's for the veterinarian. It's for the veterinarian staff. We have a huge focus on design, on making things as absolutely intuitive to use as possible. You shouldn't have to click on so many different buttons just to get what you want done. One of my favorite statistics is that if you spend your time every day doing something that takes 5 seconds, and you have to do that repetitive action 50 times a day, like, clicking a button to print out an invoice or something, you have to click 5 different buttons to get to. And that happens over the course of, 5 years. That's 2 weeks worth of your whole life spent clicking buttons. And that's what it's like to live in any of these other softwares right now. If we can just reduce that time, make it super intuitive to do all those actions towards the workflow of how a veterinarian and a veterinary hospital needs to work, we can dramatically reduce time. There's so much wasted opportunities. We can automate everything. Managing inventory right now is something that takes a huge amount of time. Usually, assign a tech to do the counts and having to do the ordering and the monitoring and all of that. But that should just be automated. We can just run a really, really basic AI to predict inventory usage and automatically order the right amounts from the distributor. That saves time right there. Leverage natural language processing to do auto completions while the veterinarian is writing their text. That saves time and improves, the quality of the medical records. And so there's so many opportunities in each individual little facet of what we're doing that we can, one, save time, but then two, also make the technology and make the software a better facilitator of better practices and medicine eventually. I kind of describe Vetspire always as kind of like 10 different startups in one because, we've built out, of course, this amazing medical records platform. Then there's the whole billing integrations on top of it to manage all the invoices. Then, of course, there's the financial analytics. And then there's the marketing support. We do all of this we have the philosophy of it being a one-stop shop all for everybody. You're one seamless place where you can do everything from the marketing to the invoicing, et cetera. And so it's in each of those little individual areas, there's so much room for innovation. And that's what we've tried to do with Vetspire. Think from the ground up, if we were to redesign it, what would be the ideal way for veterinarians? Not just solve individual problems, but really think, what is the workflow that the veterinarian, that the pet owner wants, and build that right into this.
Well, Sam, that was a really short description. Thank you very much. No, that was great. That was exactly what I was looking for.
I love talking about Vetspire, so I'll go on for hours if you want me to.
No, it's awesome to hear your passion and enthusiasm for the product. It's great. People obviously know how to check you out. You're everywhere's online. I wish this conversation was longer, and I think that we're seeing this trend in our episodes, Ivan. They all seem to need to be about 20 minutes longer. But we're at the end, Sam. So we like to ask 2 questions when we wrap up. One is something that's inspired you along your path to becoming an entrepreneur and running this company. That's the first question. Whether it's a book, TED Talk, YouTube video, anything at all. Something that our listeners can check out to learn a little bit more about the way you think, maybe.
Yeah, no, I love reading, and so I love literature, and so I'll give you a book recommendation. And there's a great book called The Idea Factory about Bell Labs kind of in the early 20th century. And in this kind of one lab, you kind of got the entire computer revolution that happened. And so many Nobel Prizes came out of that, so many new inventions, and it was all within a very, very small space with a very small amount of people. And it's kind of amazing kind of how they were able to pack so much innovation happening in such a short time frame, all working together. And that's definitely inspired me, especially not just in building Vetspire, but in trying to build out a company that fosters that type of innovation atmosphere. And so it's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it to everybody about how innovation and a whole revolution kind of works and can be fostered within a small confined space.
Wicked. Thanks for that recommendation. And then the last question for you, before we let you go, is do you know any other innovators in the vet space that you think me and Ivan should have on the podcast?
Oh, definitely. No, one of the most wonderful things right now I think about the veterinary field is there's so many wonderful people coming into the field or engaging in the field right now to really help innovate. So, I mean, there's so many names. But off the top of my head, I know because we were talking about food recently, there's a guy out here in Silicon Valley, Ryan Bensoncourt. He's creating a brand new dog food company called Wild Earth. That's really cool, doing all kind of vegan ingredients. He has a funny commercial where he eats the food himself. He's a really great guy. He thinks really well about the space and food.
Listen, it was tons of fun to have you on the show, Sam. I hope to be able to meet you sometime at one of the shows live. And yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ivan.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for spending the time. I know how busy you are.
Oh, no, it's my absolute pleasure. It's such a pleasure to chat with you both.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryiinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.